Karol Józef Wojtyła, known as Saint John Paul II, was born on May 18, 1922, in the small town of Wadowice, Poland. From an early age, his life was marked by painful losses, such as the death of his mother, Emilia, when he was just 9 years old. His father, Karol Sr., became his reference figure, educating young Karol in the Catholic faith and love for the Church. Wojtyła's youth was marked by enthusiasm for studies, literature, and theater, but also by a deep desire to know God better. Even in the face of World War II, which brought devastation and suffering to his homeland, he kept his faith alive, working as a laborer and secretly studying theology. The Nazi occupation of Poland was a period of persecution for the Polish people and the Church. During these dark years, young Karol Wojtyła entered Krakow's clandestine seminary under the protection of Archbishop Adam Sapieha and dedicated himself to priestly formation amid dangerous and challenging conditions. On November 1, 1946, Karol Wojtyła was ordained a priest. He was sent to Rome to study theology at the Pontifical Gregorian University, where he stood out for his intelligence and dedication. During this time, he deepened his understanding of the Church's role in defending human dignity. After completing his studies in Rome, the young priest returned to Poland, where he began to work intensely in the apostolate with young people. Karol had a special charisma for attracting young people, organizing excursions to the mountains, prayer meetings, and philosophical debates, always with the aim of strengthening the Catholic faith in the midst of communist society. In 1958, at the age of 38, Wojtyła was appointed Auxiliary Bishop of Krakow, an event that marked the beginning of a new phase in his life.
Before continuing with this video, I would like to invite you to reflect with us on our spiritual life as Catholics. Many times, in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, we set prayer aside, even though we know how important it is for our spiritual life. With this in mind, I have created an ebook called Prayer Routine for Catholics. In it, I share simple and effective ways to integrate prayer into your daily life, bringing more serenity and closeness to God. This material is a valuable companion for those who wish to live their faith more intensely and consistently. The link to the ebook is in the first comment of this video. Click the link and receive your ebook right now. May God bless you.
As a bishop, he fought for the right to religious freedom and the dignity of Poles, defying the communist government's repression with courage and unshakable faith. Now, Bishop Wojtyła has become a central figure for the Church in Poland, standing out for his deep spirituality, pastoral leadership, and defense of human rights. His approach always sought to balance firmness with compassion, even in the face of the regime's attempts to silence the voice of the Church. In 1964, Wojtyła was named Archbishop of Krakow, consolidating his influence on the country's religious life. He led the construction of Nowa Huta's new church, a symbolic achievement in a neighborhood created by the communist government to be a godless society. During the Second Vatican Council, 1962 to 1965, Archbishop Wojtyła played an important role in drafting documents that would shape the contemporary Church. He contributed especially to the Constitution Gaudium et Spes, which dealt with the dignity of the human person and the mission of the Church in the modern world. In 1967, Karol Wojtyła was created Cardinal by Pope Paul VI, a recognition of his leadership and defense of the Catholic faith in Poland and beyond. As Cardinal, he continued to inspire his people by remaining close to young people, families, and workers while facing constant surveillance from communist authorities. Wojtyła's election to the papacy on October 16, 1978 was a historic event, as he became the first non-Italian pope in over 400 years. Like St. John Paul II, he began his pontificate with a powerful message: "Do not be afraid," urging Catholics to trust God in times of uncertainty. From the beginning, St. John Paul II was a missionary pope, traveling tirelessly to bring the gospel message to every corner of the world. He made 104 international trips, visiting 129 countries, always promoting peace, human dignity, and respect for religious freedom. One of the most impactful moments of his pontificate occurred on May 13, 1981, when he was the victim of an attack in St. Peter's Square. Believing he was saved through the intercession of Our Lady of Fatima, the Pope forgave his attacker, Mehmet Ali Aka, exemplifying the true Christian spirit of mercy. St. John Paul II's Marian devotion was expressed in his papal motto, Totus Tuus, all yours. He consecrated his pontificate to the Virgin Mary and firmly believed that it was she who protected him during the attack. His trust in Mary's intercession inspired millions of believers around the world. One of St. John Paul II's greatest legacies was his uncompromising defense of the dignity of human life. He took a stand against abortion, euthanasia, and other forms of disrespect for life, calling Catholics to be defenders of life in all contexts and circumstances. In 1995, the Pope published the encyclical Evangelium Vitae, in which he reaffirmed the Church's position on the sacredness of human life from conception to natural death. He also called for government's responsibility to protect the most vulnerable, especially the unborn and the sick. St. John Paul II also played a key role in the fall of communism in Eastern Europe. His visit to Poland in 1979 was a catalyst for the Solidarity movement, led by Lech Wałęsa, which helped to overthrow the communist regime in the country and, eventually, throughout the region. For the Pope, religious freedom was an essential pillar for a just and peaceful society. He believed that without freedom to practice faith, human dignity was compromised. This conviction led him to take a firm stance against any form of religious oppression. St. John Paul II also dedicated a large part of his pontificate to ecumenical and interreligious dialogue. He was the first pope to visit a synagogue and a mosque, promoting mutual understanding between Christians, Jews, and Muslims, and combating anti-Semitism and other forms of intolerance. St. John Paul II also promoted World Youth Day, an international meeting of young Catholics that began in 1985. He believed that young people were the hope of the Church and needed to be guided to live their faith with enthusiasm and conviction. In 1986, he called the Assisi meeting, bringing together leaders of various religions to pray for world peace. This event symbolized his desire to see humanity united in pursuit of justice and reconciliation, regardless of religious beliefs. The World Youth Days became landmark moments of his pontificate, bringing together millions of young people in different parts of the world. At these events, the Pope always emphasized the importance of personal holiness and courage to witness the gospel. In his encyclical Ut Unum Sint, he reaffirmed the Catholic Church's commitment to Christian unity, highlighting the need for a common effort to overcome historical divisions and achieve full communion. During the years 1990-2000, St. John Paul II continued to teach and lead the Church with important encyclicals such as Veritatis Splendor, which addressed Christian morality, and Fides et Ratio, which dealt with the relationship between faith and reason, always seeking to strengthen the faith of the faithful. The Polish Pope also devoted special attention to promoting world peace. He condemned war and violence as means of resolving conflicts, always appealing to dialogue and diplomacy as paths to resolving global tensions. St. John Paul II was also a staunch supporter of social justice. He highlighted the need to protect workers' rights and combat poverty, always based on the Church's social doctrine. In the year 2000, he celebrated the Great Jubilee, an event that invited the faithful to reflect on God's mercy and the forgiveness of sins. That year, he also canonized St. Faustina Kowalska and officially instituted the Feast of Divine Mercy on the Sunday after Easter. During the Jubilee, the Pope asked forgiveness for historical sins committed by members of the Church, including their treatment of Jews and their role in colonization. This act of humility profoundly marked his desire to purify the memory of the Church and open a new path of reconciliation. St. John Paul II believed that recognizing the errors of the past was a necessary step towards a future that was more fraternal and faithful to the mission of Christ. In the final years of his pontificate, St. John Paul II faced health challenges, especially Parkinson's disease, which limited his mobility and his ability to speak. Even so, he continued to be a figure of spiritual strength, facing suffering with dignity and faith. His funeral on April 8, 2005, was one of the biggest events in history, with the presence of world leaders, religious people, and believers from different parts of the planet. It was a testimony to the global impact of his life and ministry, marked by love and fidelity to God. On April 2, 2005, St. John Paul II died in the Vatican after fighting bravely against the disease. His death provoked a wave of worldwide commotion, bringing together millions of people in prayer and paying tribute to the Pope who had touched so many lives. The cause for St. John Paul II's canonization was initiated shortly after his death, due to popular pressure and the recognition of his holiness by millions of believers. He was beatified on May 1, 2011 by Pope Benedict XVI in a ceremony that brought together more than 1 million people in Rome. On April 27, 2014, St. John Paul II was canonized by Pope Francis, along with St. John XXIII. The canonization was a moment of joy and celebration for the Church, confirming the Polish Pope's legacy of holiness. St. John Paul II's spirituality was deeply rooted in prayer, especially the Eucharist and Marian devotion. He also had a special love for the Rosary, which he considered a powerful spiritual weapon for all Catholics. The Polish Pope firmly believed in the importance of personal holiness as a path of transformation for the world. He often said that the world needs saints, and that each person is called to seek holiness in their state of life.
Before continuing with this video, I would like to invite you to reflect with us on our spiritual life as Catholics. Many times, in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, we set prayer aside, even though we know how important it is for our spiritual life. With this in mind, I have created an ebook called Prayer Routine for Catholics. In it, I share simple and effective ways to integrate prayer into your daily life, bringing more serenity and closeness to God. This material is a valuable companion for those who wish to live their faith more intensely and consistently. The link to the ebook is in the first comment of this video. Click the link and receive your ebook right now. May God bless you.
His love for youth was evident in his commitment to guiding young people toward a life of prayer and service. He always encouraged them to be protagonists of a new evangelization, taking the message of Christ everywhere. Furthermore, St. John Paul II was an example of perseverance and courage in times of adversity. He showed that suffering, when united with the cross of Christ, can become a source of redemption and sanctification. The impact of St. John Paul II on the Catholic Church and the world is immeasurable. He inspired a generation of Catholics to live their faith courageously and not be afraid to witness the gospel, even in times of persecution and opposition. His words, encyclicals, and teachings continue to guide the Church, providing a solid foundation for moral teaching and evangelization. He always highlighted the need for fidelity to Catholic doctrine, even in an ever-changing world. The figure of St. John Paul II is remembered as a man of deep spirituality, unconditional love for Christ and his Church, and a tireless defender of human dignity. He left us the example of a heart completely surrendered to the will of God. Their fight for freedom, especially in Eastern Europe, showed the world the power of faith to transform society. He believed that true freedom is only possible when it is rooted in truth and justice, in accordance with the teachings of Christ. St. John Paul II also highlighted the importance of reconciliation and forgiveness in his messages to the world. He believed that forgiveness was essential for peace, and that Christians should be the first to seek reconciliation, even in situations of conflict. Another striking aspect of his life was his compassion for the poor and marginalized. He always sought to be close to those most in need, bringing hope and comfort to those who suffer. Pope Wojtyła was also a great promoter of world peace. He has repeatedly called for an end to conflicts, especially in the wars in the Middle East, the Balkans, and Africa, always asking for prayers and concrete actions for peace. For St. John Paul II, peace was not just the absence of war, but a condition that demanded justice, respect for human rights, and the dignity of all people. He believed that only a world founded on God's moral law could achieve true peace. Devotion to divine mercy was a central feature of his ministry. Inspired by the revelations of Saint Faustina, he promoted the message of mercy as the hope of the world, calling everyone to trust in God's merciful love. The canonization of Saint Faustina in the year 2000 and the institution of the Feast of Divine Mercy were significant milestones in the pontificate of St. John Paul II, showing his deep belief in mercy as a key to understanding the heart of God. Even in the midst of so many activities, St. John Paul II never neglected his personal prayer life. He spent long hours before the Blessed Sacrament, seeking Christ's strength to face the challenges of his pontificate. His encyclical Redemptor Hominis, published in 1979, emphasized the central role of Christ in human life and history. He stated that Jesus Christ is the Redeemer of every man and that only in him can humanity find true freedom and redemption. In Veritatis Splendor, he reaffirmed Catholic morality, highlighting the importance of following the moral law as an expression of God's truth. This encyclical was a guide for Catholics in an increasingly relativistic world. In Fides et Ratio, published in 1998, the Pope highlighted the relationship between faith and reason, arguing that both are essential for the search for truth. He believed that the Christian faith is rational and that reason, illuminated by faith, can lead to a deeper understanding of God and the world. St. John Paul II always highlighted the importance of the family as a fundamental cell of society. He encouraged couples to be open to life, to raise their children in the faith, and to be a living testimony of Christ's love in the world. His apostolic exhortation, Familiaris Consortio, addressed the role of the family in the church and society, defending the indissolubility of marriage and calling couples to a life of sacrificial love. The defense of life was also a constant theme in his homilies and speeches. He always emphasized that each human life is a sacred gift from God, regardless of the circumstances of its conception or health condition. The Polish Pope was a moral leader who inspired millions of people to embrace a life of holiness, even in a world filled with challenges and temptations. He believed that true freedom came from obedience to God and his love. St. John Paul II also had a deep love for the liturgy, always emphasizing the centrality of the Eucharist in the Christian life. He encouraged liturgical renewal that was faithful to the Church's traditions, but also accessible to modern believers. In his weekly audiences, he taught on theological and moral topics, always seeking to educate the faithful in the faith. His catechesis on the theology of the body offered a deeper understanding of human sexuality in light of God's love. The theology of the body is a set of teachings that St. John Paul II presented between 1979 and 1984, exploring the beauty of God's plan for the human body and sexuality. He taught that the body is an icon of divine love, and that marriage is an image of Christ's love for the Church. On his travels, St. John Paul II always sought to visit places of suffering, such as hospitals, orphanages, and prisons, bringing comfort and hope. He wanted to be the good shepherd who did not abandon his sheep, especially the most wounded. On the Jubilee of the year 2000, St. John Paul II invited all Catholics to renew their faith in Christ and to live a new spiritual springtime. He believed that the new millennium would be an opportunity for the Church to evangelize the world with renewed missionary zeal. In his reflections on the spirituality of the new millennium, the Polish Pope highlighted the need for a return to prayer and meditation, stating that holiness was the main goal of every Christian. He urged the faithful to seek a life of intimacy with God. One of the last documents of his pontificate was the encyclical Ecclesia de Eucharistia, published in 2003, in which he reinforced the centrality of the Eucharist in the life of the Church and called Catholics to a deeper devotion to the Blessed Sacrament. In this encyclical, St. John Paul II reaffirmed that the Eucharist is the source and summit of all Christian life, inviting the faithful to experience true communion with Christ through this central sacrament. Even in the last years of his life, St. John Paul II maintained a joyful and hopeful spirit. He never let illness stop him from fulfilling his mission as a universal pastor, inspiring the faithful to persevere in faith, even in the midst of difficulties. The Pope always saw himself as a servant of Christ and the Church, fulfilling his mission to the end. His death was a moment of mourning, but also of hope, as many believed that he was already in the glory of heaven, interceding for those he left on earth. St. John Paul II was a pope who left a legacy of holiness, courage, and love for humanity. He challenged everyone to live the Catholic faith more fervently, remembering that love is stronger than death. His words and teachings continue to resonate in the Church today, inspiring new leaders, young people, and believers around the world. He is remembered as a pope of conviction and a tireless defender of the truth of the gospel. For many, the life of St. John Paul II is a testimony that holiness is possible, even in times of adversity. His story teaches us that God's grace can transform the world, as long as we are open instruments of His love. The life and ministry of St. John Paul II are a call to each of us to seek a deeper faith and a more sincere commitment to Christ. He showed us that holiness is not a distant ideal, but a reality accessible to all who trust in God. May your example continue to inspire us to follow the path of Christ with courage and joy, seeking to live holiness in all aspects of our lives. Saint John Paul II, pray for us.